So I wanted to make a video about gun control and why gun-free zones don't really work without it, but then tragedy struck again and I really don't want to make a video on gun control on the back of one of those. So video's probably never gonna happen. So I decided that instead we will be talking about something a little more light-hearted and fun, like death and the nature of the universe. The chill shit. Now to be clear, I am an atheist and I have been for pretty much all of my life. But I am open to the idea of an afterlife. It's just that the evidence that I have been presented with, which does exist, is so sparse, so inconclusive, and so weak that I see no logical reason to believe in it. But there is one type of afterlife that occurred to me, and has probably occurred to other people also, that not only makes a lot of sense, but also has some very interesting statistical arguments going for it. Basically, the Buddhists are correct. Or at least they're the most correct of all the major religions. But first we will have to delve into two things. The first of which is the simulation hypothesis, which you have probably at least heard of. Now, the simulation hypothesis posits that the entire universe around us, everything that we perceive, everything that we are, isn't real in the traditional sense, but actually runs on a highly advanced and impossibly powerful computer in another universe. There are several arguments for this, such as the apparent lack of alien life in the universe, though to be fair, that might just be because we've been staring at a single brick in the wall of a Tesla gigafactory-sized warehouse from a distance, and we've concluded that there are no electronics in this building. Some people argue that the stars that we see with our telescopes aren't actually there. They're just projections that display what we would expect to see if we looked there, right? And they would possibly pop into existence if we actually traveled to those stars, but right now they just don't exist at all. That would of course cut back on the vast majority of processing power needed to run a universe if you're only going to run one solar system. But a lot of people think that this is an artifact of anthropocentrism, and that really there should be computers who can run entire universes with ease. Matryoshka brains, for instance, are hypothetically capable of simulating thousands of universes with their advanced computing powers. By the way, if you don't know what Matryoshka brains are, it's basically a supercomputer that has many shells, and it goes around the sun, and it absorbs all of the sunlight. But, you could say it's solar powered, right? But really at that point you could also argue that it's fusion powered. The point is that people think that we might very well not be the purpose of the simulation, and life itself might not even be the purpose of the entire simulation. Basically all of us would be highly advanced bugs in the system that the creators may be tangentially aware of or not at all, because they're really studying some completely different aspect of universe creation that we don't even have the slightest inkling of. And no, I think therefore I am is not at all an argument that you are not a piece of software, because we have no reason to assume that computers couldn't be just as conscious as humans are. You may very well be software and you would still be real and alive. The whole possibility of thing is also the strongest argument in favor of the simulation hypothesis, right? We are 99% certain that in the future we will be able to build a supercomputer that can simulate a universe that is much like our own, right? So that begs the question, how do we know that we aren't already a universe that is simulated by a supercomputer in a higher universe, right? And because it is extremely likely that we would be able to simulate a lot of universes, and many of those universes would be able to simulate universes of their own, it becomes extremely unlikely that we are living in an unsimulated universe. Because simulated universes outnumber unsimulated universes by a ridiculous number. So basically it's illogical to believe that we aren't a simulation, because it is illogical to believe the least likely outcome of an event is the outcome that it will have. It might, but the chances are pretty damn low. So who would be able to simulate entire universes? Well, post-scarcity civilizations, of course. In a post-scarcity civilization, resources are so abundant and readily available that they can fulfill all human needs and desires at all times. Basically, it's Star Trek, where you can just have anything you want at any point in time, and there is no need for a market economy anymore because there is just enough of every luxury to go around, even if everyone consumed massive amounts of it. And also there's always new shit for you to discover because there's just so many different things. Basically, the wealthiest millionaires of our time are extremely poor compared to the poorest people in a post-scarcity civilization. And their attitudes to life don't work there because greed is eliminated by abundance. I mean, sure, if you wanted to own the entire universe, you wouldn't get that, of course, right? But what the fuck kind of person would you be if you did want the entire universe? Well, you might be a spoiled cunt, is what you might be. Imagine for a moment rich kids, okay? Kids who had every wish that they ever had fulfilled instantly because their parents just had the resources to make that happen. I mean, some of them are alright, mostly those who have experienced some sort of struggle or hardship, but a lot of them are also just huge, incompetent adult human beings that couldn't survive a single day as anyone but an incredibly rich person in the real world. No matter how useless you are as a human being, if your parents have a lot of money, chances are you're gonna be wealthy your entire life. The only thing that could stop that is extreme incompetence, like ridiculous incompetence, and factors completely outside of anyone's control. Also, you're probably either going to be a huge altruist or a massive asshole, right? And if you grow up incredibly sheltered from all the evils of humanity and all the dangers of life and all the hardships that other people experience, well, being an asshole is much more likely. Now imagine growing up in a world where you just always got everything you ever wanted and you never experienced hardship because there just isn't any hardship anywhere. You couldn't go to Africa to do a year of self-discovery while building houses for poor people, right? In Africa, houses build themselves at that point, as they do in all parts of the human sphere of influence. So how do you make sure new human beings don't grow up to be cunts? Well, you set up a series of simulations, or you have them live out entire lifespans in a pre-post scarcity world, or just a scarcity world. Then, when they have amassed huge amounts of life experience and learn to value things, material and immaterial, they wake up in your post-scarcity world, in the real world, or maybe that's a simulation as well, where they will be biologically immortal. The simulation would also provide you with a lot of interesting cultural goods. There's so many interesting stories to be told about people, so many interesting civilizations that have existed over the course of human history, right? So many genres of music, so many styles of architecture, visual aesthetics, works of art. There's just so much of it. There could be huge amounts of people in the post-scarcity world just exploring our world and its history as their hobby for years. But what about Hitler? What about kids that were born rich and are thus spoiled in the exact way they would have been in the post-scarcity world? What about kids that die young, God forbid, right? Well, this is where the video takes on distinctly Buddhist undertones. If the person dies and turns out not to be ready for the post-scarcity civilization, just give them another go. Fucking put the memories behind a wall, have them be born again. And they do that, and when they're not ready then, just do the same thing again, until the point where they are ready to leave the simulation. It's not like you lack time. If you think about it, the traits that are associated with enlightenment are exactly the traits that you would want people to have if they lived in a post-scarcity world. You'd want them to be kind, empathetic, and unattached to material goods, because material goods are a shit motivator in a world where there's just such an abundance of them. You'd want people to understand how, without post-scarcity, life is suffering, right? You want them to appreciate the abundance of things that there are. You want them to value life, and to value life, they need to understand death. And sure, you could make the argument that in the far future, humanity could just alter itself to change its drives, so it would no longer be its former caveman self, but some other thing that is perfectly suited for living in a post-scarcity world. But especially in the farthest of futures, there would still be like just a small faction, a tiny faction of a couple 100 trillion traditional humans that have remained the same because they have chosen to remain the same. And they're living somewhere in the universe. And they, like all the others, have access to high-tech supercomputers. But what should you do with this information? I don't know. It's just an idea anyway, right? Like all the other visions of the afterlife, it's not particularly likely to be true. I mean, it's more likely to be true than most visions of the afterlife because it exists within known science and it's not at all implausible, but still. If you ask me, just continue doing what you've been doing all along. Try to be nice to people. Better yourself. Pursue your goals. This isn't a fucking life advice video, okay? It just isn't. It's just some fucking spaced out idea that I had. I'm not here to tell you how you live your fucking life, so stop asking me. In that spirit, support me with material goods on Maker Support and PayPal. Join my Discord and see you around, cunts. Should have called this video How to Inadvertently Start a Religion. Fucking don't make a religion out of this. Don't.